Washington Post reports that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo may be leaving his post to run for a Senate seat in Kansas in 2020. Now, the Post says Pompeo has not decided yet if he'll run for sure, but President Trump is already thinking about possible replacements. And joining us now is the man behind this reporting, Washington Post columnist, senior political analyst Josh Rogin. Josh, great to have you here on New Day.
Good morning.
So Pompeo has been back to Kansas 4 times this year at least. He has hotly denied any interest in this. I guess the real question is, does the president want to see him go?
Right. Well, if you're Mike Pompeo, your one goal is to run for president in 2024. And the thing you have to do, number one, to get there is to stay in the good graces of President Trump. And Pompeo's calculation has been that Trump wants him to stay. But as President Trump has said, and as Mitch McConnell is pushing, if Kansas looks like it's going to get lost to the Democrats, like if former Secretary of State Chris Kobach wins the primary and looks like he's going to lose the general, then both McConnell and Trump might push Pompeo into the race at the last minute. And I think that's why you see Pompeo sending mixed signals, opening up a Twitter account with Kansas farmland in the background, meeting with donors, and doing all this stuff just to leave it open. But right now it seems like he's leaning against the run, actually.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. But, you know, who are the folks that Trump has been floating internally? You've got a couple candidates you mentioned in your article.
Right. So President Trump, you know, just in case he runs, or even if he makes it to a second term, has been sounding out lawmakers and officials about who might be good to come next. And the name you hear most often is National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien. Although he just became National Security Advisor in September, everybody seems to like him. He's a polished, competent technocrat with good relationships and a lot of diplomatic experience. The other guy is Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who's very close to the president, and he's ride or die in this administration. He's been Treasury Secretary for 3 years. But there's a lot of concern in national security circles that he's dovish on China and too Wall Street focused and doesn't really have any other foreign policy experience at all to speak of. And then you've got Rick Grinnell, the ambassador to Germany, who's got a very abrupt and aggressive diplomatic style, but that's like a selling point for Trump. And then you've got Steve Biegun, who's the Deputy Secretary of State, who would be acting if Pompeo leaves. And depending on when he leaves, he might be acting for quite a long time.
And who would have the easiest time passing a Senate vote?
Clearly, O'Brien and Biegun have the best relationships, and Mnuchin and Grinnell barely got confirmed the last time, and the Democrats would put up a big fight on them.
All right, it's fascinating stuff, but you're hearing that actually Pompeo may be leaning against that.
Well, that's right. As we get closer and closer to the deadline, his prospects go down, and also you have to think about it.
And when is that deadline, Josh?
June 1, and you have to think about it in the context of the impeachment, right? If you want to run for president in 2024, by then, a lot of people are going to forget about the details of impeachment. But by June 1, it's still going to be fresh in people's minds, and Pompeo is trying to avoid answering a lot of questions about that. So you could argue it either way. I think that's why he hasn't made up his mind yet.
Before we go, you've done a lot of extraordinary reporting on China, and today, China, Iran, and Russia begin 4 days of joint military exercises in the Gulf of Oman. What's behind this drift of these 3 strategic opponents of the U.S. closer together over the Trump administration's tenure?
Yeah, it's a big deal. There's no coincidence that these are the 3 leading authoritarian dictatorships that are internally repressive and externally aggressive and see the United States and its free and democratic partners as their main enemies, okay? And this is the competition that's shaping up, and you know, they're increasingly seeing themselves as strategic allies against us. And again, that's not kind of calls into question about where is American foreign policy really headed? Is it headed in the Pompeo, Pence, O'Brien direction, or should we go with the Mnuchin direction, which is like, oh yeah, China's probably fine, and we just need to work it out and make some money. And if you look at what the other side is doing, it leads you to the inevitable conclusion that we should probably be bolstering our alliances and preparing for our competition so that our system and our values and our interests can eventually win out.
Josh Rogin, thanks for joining us on New Day.
Anytime.